The Senate trial of President Trump could begin as soon as next week as the House prepares to turn over the articles of impeachment. Tomorrow, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi will hold a vote on sending the articles to the Senate. Pelosi made the announcement while meeting with her Democratic caucus earlier today. She has also planned a full House vote on the impeachment managers. They will argue the case for Democrats. This ends a 3-week-long impasse. The House voted on the charges against the president back in December. Democrats had demanded more fairness in the rules. Mainly, they want witnesses to testify. CBS News has learned Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is likely to begin the trial next Tuesday. McConnell has said his chamber will move ahead with deciding the rules for the Senate trial without input from Democrats. Here's how he reacted to Pelosi's announcement earlier.
I cannot say what Democrats do and do not really believe. But they certainly do not seem to display the urgency or the seriousness you'd expect from people who actually thought they had proven the president should be removed. No matter how irresponsibly this has been handled across the Capitol, impeachment is not a political game, and the United States Senate will not treat it like one.
For more on this, I want to bring in CBS News White House correspondent Ben Tracy and CBSN political contributor Molly Hooper. Molly, do you believe Pelosi decided now is the time to transmit the articles? Why did she decide now?
Why did she decide now? Well, that's a good question. I think that Democrats, some of them in her party, want to know why wait until now. And if you listen to somebody like Chuck Schumer, who earlier today was on a competing network, ABC News, he essentially said he was glad that Nancy Pelosi held these articles for so long because in the few weeks since the House voted on articles of impeachment, more documents have come to light. I think we'll get to this later, but revelations, text messages, and we've seen John Bolton, who is much coveted by the Democrats. He wants John Bolton. They all want John Bolton to come in and testify. John Bolton has signaled a willingness to testify, and Schumer would argue that Democrats needed that time to sort of build up support among the public, especially individuals in those key states where half a dozen Republican senators are up for re-election. Because when it comes down to it, Chuck Schumer is going to need to peel off at least 4 Republicans to vote to call certain witnesses before the Senate as part of this impeachment trial.
I want to turn to you, Ben. Who is the president planning on having for his defense team in the trial?
Well, the president's defense team says it is ready to go, and there's 2 names that people will become very familiar with over the course of this Senate trial. The first is Pat Cipollone. He is the White House counsel. He is largely a behind-the-scenes, pretty low-key lawyer, but he is expected to do a lot of the arguing, actually, in the Senate during this trial. The second person is Jay Sekulow, who is one of the president's private attorneys, one of his personal attorneys. He's not only an actual attorney, but he also plays one on TV. And that appeals to President Trump, who likes somebody who can make a good argument in public. So you're going to have those 2 kind of take the lead. The real wild card here is Rudy Giuliani. It is no secret that Rudy Giuliani has been pitching himself to join this defense team. I don't think that's going to happen. It seems the only person who's somewhat open to the idea is the president, but everyone else around him is telling him that that is a very bad idea.
Ben, could we see the president pull over House Republicans who have argued in his favor to participate in the trial?
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about congressmen like Jim Jordan, John Ratcliffe. These are people who have been very vocal defenders of President Trump. They were seen by folks here at the White House at being fairly effective during the House impeachment proceedings, mainly because they were the guys who were willing to kind of inject some of the conspiracy theories and the real red-blooded partisan politics into those proceedings. But the president is being warned by people like Lindsey Graham, don't go down that road. We don't want that in the Senate. We need to have a higher level of decorum now that this has reached the trial phase. So the president is getting some pushback on that.
Molly, I want to turn to you. Who do you expect to see the speaker select as the impeachment managers?
Well, now this is the hot button question up on Capitol Hill, and something that everybody's been looking forward to finding out for the past few weeks, because this is a high profile position for whomever is selected to be House impeachment manager. Look at the Republican House impeachment managers back in Clinton. Lindsey Graham was one among them. And so I've heard names like Adam Schiff, who's the current chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, and has also, this is important to note, managed impeachment trials in the Senate regarding judges, but he has experience with that in front of the Senate. Jerry Nadler, the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, his name has been mentioned, and we're also hearing other individuals who may not be necessarily at the top of your list, perhaps. Justin Amash, a former Republican independent, currently an independent, who was one of the first Republicans at the time, maybe the only one, to come out and actively, question how President Trump was doing his business and whether, he should be impeached or not. I think that you can also look for some up-and-coming Democrats, younger members who've proven their mettle on the Judiciary Committee, perhaps Jamie Raskin. But again, this is a position that a lot of Democrats want, and Nancy Pelosi keeps leaving us in suspense until tomorrow.
So perhaps a name we don't hear all the time. Everyone's waiting to see.
Possibly. And somebody who we will be hearing quite a bit from soon.
Someone we will know well.
That's right.
Ben, some Senate Republicans had called for a motion to dismiss the impeachment trial before it even begins. Does the White House believe that is a possibility?
Well, this idea got some more traction over the weekend when the president tweeted that he actually supports this approach now. But no, here at the White House, I am told by sources here at the White House that they don't see this as a possibility. They say that if a motion is made and a vote is taken, it won't even be close. And they say that because they just think the optics of this for Republicans to go through this whole process, have these articles brought over there, and then just take a party line vote and dismiss this, they just don't think that works for Republicans and that many would vote against it. So they don't really see this as a possibility. They see that these opening arguments will be made. There'll be a time for senators to submit questions. And after all that is done, that might be the time where somebody makes a motion and then they could dismiss the articles if they're all in agreement, or they could agree at that point to call witnesses.
Molly, Republican Senator Susan Collins is leading efforts to ensure witnesses are allowed in the trial. Her colleagues Mitt Romney and Lamar Alexander appear open to the idea. Let's listen to them.
I've let Senator Collins know where I stand, which is that I support the Clinton impeachment model, which is a vote on witnesses later. But as to which witnesses I want to hear from and so forth, that's something which I'm open to until after the opening arguments.
I want to make sure I have a chance to vote on whether we need additional witnesses or additional documents, and I'll decide whether we do after I hear the case and ask my questions.
Romney went on to say he'd potentially want to hear from former National Security Advisor John Bolton. Does this small group of Republicans have enough power to shape the rules of the trial, or can Leader McConnell set them however he wants?
Oh, well, no, they do. They do, because normally we hear the Senate can gum up the works when it comes to legislation because you need 67 or 60 votes to pass anything, it seems like. But not when it comes to the Senate rules. And so really all Schumer needs is 51 votes in favor of calling witnesses, and that'll happen. And McConnell has 53 Republicans that he's working with. And if he loses a few of those, well, they can decide which witnesses are coming up and how those witnesses are coming up. Because back in the Clinton impeachment, the Senate agreed to hear from witnesses, but they did so via depositions behind closed doors. So I think there's quite a few steps that the Senate would need to go through before we would actually see, say, John Bolton coming down to the well of the Senate and getting grilled by the impeachment managers. But I think that these Republicans are leaving the door open to hearing from more individuals, and that also includes receiving new documents, because as it was set out back in the Clinton days, in the initial opening arguments for both sides, the only records that they could use was the evidence that was found and discovered over during the House trial. And so any new evidence, say like a Lev Parnas, that has happened in the interim, could not be introduced until the Senate would vote to allow that to be introduced. So that's why those senators are very important, because they want to hear the case, the opening arguments, and once they're done, once those arguments have been presented and senators have had a chance to actually submit their questions and hear responses from these defense and the prosecution teams, we'll see where they go from there.
Interesting. Ben, how is the White House reacting to this push by some Republicans to call witnesses?
Well, the president himself has been all over the map on this. There are days where the president says that he wants Republicans to quickly dismiss this because it's a hoax and don't give the Democrats any traction. Then there are days, sometimes just hours later, where he'll say he wants a full-blown defense of himself, where he can call witnesses, and then also wants people like Nancy Pelosi, Adam Schiff, the whistleblower, Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, people like that to also be called. But I'm told by sources here at the White House that they do expect that enough Republicans will vote to call witnesses. So they're looking at people like Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Cory Gardner, Mitt Romney, people who have already voiced support for this, but also people like Rand Paul, who they view as kind of a wild card, or Lamar Alexander, who they view as an institutionalist, someone who's about to retire, so doesn't have as much to worry about. They think once that vote comes up, there will be enough Republicans, so they are preparing themselves for a witness portion of this trial.
Molly, I want to ask you about a report from Axios. A lawyer for Lev Parnas, an indicted former associate of the president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, says he's turned over a trove of text messages to the White House Intelligence Committee. What information could this provide on the ongoing Ukraine saga?
Well, here's where, going back to my last answer, this is where things get kind of interesting, because depending on how the Senate writes their rules of procedure, that new information may not be allowed in the initial presentation of the case in the Senate, which is why you'll see a lot of behind closed doors wrangling over the terms of receiving the impeachment case. But it could reveal quite a few things. I mean, based on what I've read, this attorney says that Lev Parnas has had text exchanges with key individuals who are relevant to the inquiry into Ukraine. And, it'd be fascinating for us to see what that was. And once that's revealed, I think you look at those more skeptical kind of Republicans who've already had questions about whether, about how the whole situation was conducted, who would be more open to perhaps voting for witnesses to testify behind closed doors, or in fact in person in front of all of the United States to see. And I think that having that information would give them more fodder to vote to see more witnesses and more documents. I know.
A big moment in history coming soon. Before we go, I want to ask a quick question about Iran, Ben. France, Germany, and the UK are taking steps to reimpose sanctions on the country, accusing Iran of breaking the 2015 nuclear deal. You'll recall the president pulled the U.S. out of that deal. What's the significance of the move by U.S. allies?
Well, this is basically these European countries acknowledging a reality that Iran is no longer in compliance with this 2015 agreement known as the JCPOA. So this is the first formal step where they basically say, we are putting you on notice that you are no longer complying with this agreement. And this sets in motion a 60-day period of negotiations to try to get Iran back in compliance with the deal. And if not, then there can be a reimposition of some sort of UN sanctions. This is obviously something that makes President Trump and the White House happy because they want more sanctions on Iran. But these countries, these U.S. allies, have gone out of their way to say that this is not them siding with President Trump's approach to this. They very much still take issue with the fact that he backed out of the agreement, which they think is better than nothing. And they're saying that this is not them supporting the maximum pressure effort of President Trump and the White House. They're just going along with the rules of this agreement and letting it play out the way that it's supposed to legally.
Ben Tracy and Molly Hooper, thank you.
Thank you.